We're back on Due Process talking about our environment, the law and the environment. And at the break we were talking about, we're talking about residential homes and the fact that they're built much tighter now and they're sealed more so that you don't get as much fresh air, with air conditioning and things such as that. But I'm concerned about office environments where people work in these with windows that literally will not open, and they're designed not to open. What kind of problems does that present?
Well, in an office building, that can be a problem if there aren't provisions for fresh air. There are regulatory requirements for bringing a certain amount of fresh air in per person in a commercial building.
That's called the HVAC system?
Correct. The heating, ventilation, and air conditioning system should have a makeup air system on it to bring in fresh air. However, those dampers are often closed to conserve energy in a building.
Okay. Because I remember a situation back in the mid-'70s where we had all moved into a new office building, where, having come from a building where you could open the windows, literally. We are now in this hermetically sealed building, and there were odors and things going on that we weren't even certain what they were. There were ceiling tiles, so what have people done to justify their existence in these enclosed environments?
To justify or get sick?
Yeah, well, that's what I mean. I mean, what do you do? I mean, can you bring an action? Is there a cause for action?
Oh, certainly.
And what would you do? What would you allege?
There would be suits against the, it could be the HVAC people who installed it, the builders, the
landlord.
The landlord, absolutely. There are a number of people against whom claims could be brought. And the problem is, as you said, some of you felt sick and some of you didn't.
Right.
It depends, I think, on the person's immune system, the person's allergies, and that happens in homes a lot.
Okay, we'll just say, hypothetically, someone comes to you as a lawyer and says, I'm at work and I am not feeling well. What would you do? I mean, it's costly to send a scientist or an air control expert or an environmental expert out, but how do you go about maintaining an action against the owner of a building?
Well, even though it is costly, it is important to get that building tested as well as to review the medical records of the individual, because so many of these symptoms are symptoms that could be related to something else that's going on in their life. So you would also want to, in addition to doing some testing and looking at some medical records, you would want to do a questionnaire, if possible, of the other individuals that are in the building to see if they are suffering from some similar occurrences, and ask some specific questions. Do you feel better when you go home? Are you feeling better on the weekends? Does this start by Wednesday? You're starting to have some real health effects because you've been in the building for a couple days. You know, you'd want to ask, what are the symptoms that other co-workers are experiencing now? Co-workers are going to be different. If someone is an asthmatic or someone has an allergy condition or is allergic to mold, they may react faster, but if you're going to say that a building is sick, you need to see what the occupants are experiencing.
Do you actually, you people who represent people who are exposed to these environmental impurities, do you bring about change in these buildings? I mean, you can sue and collect money for your clients, I assume, but what do you do? What happens to the building? It continues to, I mean, do you actually have changes made?
Oh, especially in the insurance field, ultimately somebody is probably going to have insurance for this, be it a first-party case or a case against a landlord. The duty and their obligation is to remediate or to get rid of the mold.
Does that usually happen?
Yes, there are, I guess, a couple different issues here. First, there was the reference to the employees who are getting sick at the workplace.
Right.
They're going to file a claim or a lawsuit with respect to their injuries. They have a very difficult hurdle with respect to causation. They have to come in, you know, with certainty to identify the actual chemical or the toxin in the environment that's causing their illness, and that is very, very difficult to do.
Right. You can't do the case without testing.
You have to test.
You can't be pointing to a building and saying we're all getting sick without knowing if there is really something in the building that's making them sick.
First, you have to identify the problem within the environment, and then you're going to have to be able to tie it or show the link between the illness and the toxin.
Without naming the facility, what is the worst situation you've been in as a scientist?
Well, as a scientist, most of the worst situations I've come across have actually been residential. The significant water damage that does cause the significant growth that of molds that produce toxins. People spend more time in their homes than they do usually at their workplace. So I've seen the most significant concerns actually in the homes. We have a smaller volume of air. If there is a contaminant generated, then you have a smaller volume of air than you would in a commercial building.
I know this is getting away from the law, but do you advise your people to sort of like open the windows whenever they can, air it out as much as possible?
Well, that can be an option for someone who doesn't have allergies against outdoor molds, but unfortunately,
Outdoor molds. Oh,
there's been a 60% rise in allergies in the last 20 years.
What's the cause for that?
Well, many things. Environmental tobacco smoke is a major cause of the increase in asthma and allergies. Molds are a significant cause, and chemical off-gassings.
Okay, so let's get down to you, because you got to one of the hot buttons. The employers that say, this is where you smoke. This is a room designated for the smokers. Now, how in the world, as a defense lawyer, how can you contain smoke in a room in an office building?
Well, most of the employers I see now are sending their employees outside to smoke, so like I said, that doesn't become an issue,
okay,
at least within the workplace.
Unless the fresh air intakes are next to the smoking, which has happened.
Well, that's what because it leads to another question. Do you find now that most buildings are smoke-free?
I was just in the Atlanta airport, and I couldn't believe that I saw a smoking room in the airport where there are no open windows.
Okay, well, then how do we five intelligent people justify restaurants in the state of Michigan that allow smoking in certain parts of the restaurant, specifically the bar areas? I mean, how you can't say, as a plaintiff's lawyer, I know you're going to say, there's no way you can stop from inhaling that smoke that's in the ambient smoke. Are you, as a defense lawyer, going to tell me that people are not smoking, not getting second and third-hand smoke?
For secondhand smoke, I think it then becomes very difficult for a plaintiff to come in and say that, you know, my lung cancer was caused by this secondary smoke from that restaurant that I went to 7 years ago.
I know
there's litigation.
That's tough, but you're talking about mild reactions, allergic reactions to mold when you walk into a restaurant and people are smoking, and the owner is allowing that to happen, allowing it to occur.
But you know what, with the reactions and people being allergic to mold, you've got young people who are the most susceptible, you have elderly people. Those are the people who are in their home most of the time. The windows don't open, and they are being exposed to the mold or the toxins far more than somebody who goes into a restaurant, I would imagine, and is exposed to secondhand smoke on one occasion. In a home, you're stuck, unless the house is fixed.
Don't you think the police, we're going to have to go to a break, but don't you think the police, you don't have to answer this, should arrest parents who are smoking in their cars with their kids sitting in their seats next to them with the windows closed?
Especially if there's mold in the car.
We're going to take a break. We'll be back in due process telling you about some more dangers that may be lurking around your home and your environment when we talk about the environment and the law right here on Due Process.